There's a huge mental health crisis in Christian leadership at the moment. Your pastor, your minister, your priest, your bishop, whatever you call them, there's a massive mental health crisis going on. And the most recent data suggests that it's only going to get worse. We need to talk about it. We need to own it. We need to address it. And we need to think about what we can best do to support our ministers, our Christian leaders. To give you a bit of background about my own story, I, for many decades now, have struggled with my mental health. I've struggled with depression for decades. If you know me, you might be quite surprised to hear that, because I've got really good coping strategies in place. And also, for good and for bad, I've managed to find ways to mask it, to conceal it, and to carry on functioning well in life. But it is something that I've struggled with for a very long time, and on 2 occasions in the last 40 years I've had serious burnout with big implications for my own personal mental health. As I film this, I'm actually in a really good place mentally and physically, which is really good, but it is certainly a topic that is very close to my heart. And to hear that so many ministers, church ministers, are struggling at the moment really does break my heart. You know, it's a really tough call to go into full-time Christian ministry. And that's partly because, you know, we as Christian ministers have to lead the same life as everyone else. We've got the same issues going on that you've got in your life. But Christian ministers also carry the weight of everyone else's issues as well. You know, how much time we spend sitting with the sick and the dying and the bereaved and the lonely, people in financial crises, you know, and people going through the darkest periods of their lives. So as well as carrying the weight of their own life, your Christian minister also has to carry the weight of so many other people's lives as well. And added on top of that, Christian ministers are supposed to be brilliant at multitasking, to be able to undertake a broad range of activities, from looking after buildings to preparing sermons and to disciple people and be community leaders and what have you. And there's also this thing about us expecting our ministers to be omnicompetent as well, to be absolutely brilliant at everything they do. It's certainly the experience of myself and many others as well, that people expect Christian ministers to be brilliant at baptisms, brilliant at weddings, brilliant at preaching, brilliant at doing school assemblies, brilliant at pastoral care and buildings management and everything else. And when a minister falls slightly short on any one of those things, then the criticism that can be levelled against them can be absolutely harsh and soul-destroying and completely merciless. Christian ministers are very often expected to have good opinions on everything, from what's going on in the local community to world politics and history and everything else, and are also expected to be experts in everything, whether that's finance or you know, just theology or whatever else. So it can be really difficult for church ministers to lead a healthy mental lifestyle, and people can be merciless, as I say, when you do fail. I remember many years ago when I was a vicar in another part of London, and my wife died. She was 36 and she died of cancer, and I've been a carer for her for 7 years, and I was left as a single parent raising our 6-year-old daughter. And I remember one day I got to church on the Sunday. This is about 6 months or so after my wife had died, and I stood up to preach, and I was absolutely empty and completely broken, and I looked at the congregation and I said to them, I've got nothing to say today. I was just being really honest and open with them. And you know, 5 people walked out and never came back again because they couldn't cope with a priest who was not coping himself. And I just remember, and I probably still carry the hurt of that as well. But added on top of all of that, I think, for Christian ministers is an intense level of self-criticism. Because we feel that we've been called into a particular ministry to follow in the footsteps of Christ, it's not uncommon that when a Christian minister fails at something or doesn't perform as well as they hoped they would, they can be absolutely brutal on themselves in terms of self-criticism and self-damning. Certainly, I am a harsher critic on myself than I am on any one of my parishioners. I would never dream of being as condemnatory towards one of my parishioners when they've failed, to the extent that I am condemnatory towards myself when I've failed. So we set ourselves hugely high standards, and of course that is a war of attrition on mental health as well. But I do think also that churches, congregations, make it more difficult than they need to for ministers to maintain their mental health. Fortunately, I'm in a very, very supportive parish, and my congregation are absolutely wonderful at supporting me. But there are many, many ministers for whom that is not the case. So how do we address it? Well, I want to give 2 practical suggestions today. But just to put it into some context, the Barna Group, which is a Christian research agency based in the US, who come up with some incredible research. In 2024, they did a survey on mental health amongst Christian leaders. And just to give you some of the headline figures, amongst pastors over 45, only 21% said they were flourishing in life. 21% of pastors over 45. But when you went to pastors under the age of 45, only 7% felt that they were flourishing in life. That means 93% of church pastors under the age of 45 feel that their life is not flourishing. That is really, really a big headline figure, isn't it? And obviously we've got to have concern for those pastors themselves, but also concern for the future of the church, because if 93% of pastors under the age of 45 feel that they're not flourishing in life, then how on earth can they lead churches into a state of flourishing? You can't lead a church beyond the place where you're at yourself. And so, that's got huge ramifications, not just for those pastors, but also for the churches they lead. There was a high point in 2022 during the COVID crisis when pastors considered quitting, considered leaving the ministry. And in 2022, 42% of vicars, pastors, priests, elders, whatever you want to call them, 42% had thought about quitting during that year. They thought, no, just don't want to be a part of this anymore. This is not something that I feel comfortable doing. Now, that number now has decreased, which is really good. But in 2024, the number had decreased to 33%. Now, that means still that 1 in 3 pastors are considering quitting the ministry because it's not good for their mental health. 1 in 3. That's a huge number, isn't it? And most shocking of all, I think, most concerning of all, was that in 2024, 18% of pastors had considered suicide or self-harm. We need to sit with that figure for a moment. 18% of pastors had considered suicide or self-harm. There is a real mental health crisis in the church amongst clergy. We know that it is a very, very lonely role to have. Pastors often feel that they don't get the personal support that they need on a day-to-day basis. And certainly the research shows that many pastors feel that they don't get adequate support from the institution in which they work, their local denomination. Most clergy struggling with mental health wouldn't dream of talking to their superior about it, because they don't feel that their denomination is a safe place. If you're struggling with depression, I must admit, I've never ever spoken to my bishop or my archdeacon or any of my bishops or archdeacons about my mental health problems and about my periods of burnout or my periods of depression, and that seems to be a common thing, because why would you, when your job is tied up with your housing and your income, and you'd be frightened that it would be put on file and that it would prevent you from making any form of progression in the church thereafter. So most clergy don't feel that the church, the institution they serve, is a safe place to talk. So it becomes an increasingly lonely environment. And also, I think certainly in the last 5 years, we would all agree that people have become more critical and more harsh in their criticisms. Partly that was a result of everyone becoming keyboard warriors during the COVID crisis. But certainly, you know, as the advent of social media has increased, people are harsher, they are more judgmental, and they are less willing to forgive. And so I think clergy are on the sharp end of people's tongues and emails and letters in a way now that was never previously the case. So that sense of loneliness and emotional burden is certainly increasing. And the other thing I want to mention about clergy mental health is financial worries. Most denominations do not pay their clergy particularly well. In the Church of England, which I'm a priest in the Church of England, you're given a stipend rather than a salary. And the idea is that you're given enough to live on. Of course, in a world where inflation is rampant and utility bills are going up all the time, you know, I've got a mortgage to pay on my house as well, and pay the gas and electricity on 2 houses, and you know, a lot of clergy have financial worries as well. And it's a well-known fact, of course, that many clergy find it very difficult to make friends. That many clergy would say, well, you can't have friends in the parish or in the area you serve or in the congregation you serve, because ultimately you are their priest, you are their minister, you are their pastor, and it blurs the boundaries, it blurs the lines if you don't, if you become too close, or you develop friendships. So into this mental health crisis is this sort of intense degree of loneliness that is clearly being felt by many pastors across the world. In 2015, when they did this survey, it suggested that 37% of church ministers received monthly support, either from their peer group or their denomination. But last year, only 19% receive monthly support. That means that 81% of church ministers are working in lonely, difficult, tough environments without any support from their peers or from the institution. These figures are horrendous, aren't they? I'm sorry to make such a depressing video, but you know, we've got to speak about this. We've got to name it. We've got to own it, and we've got to address these issues, because it's only going to get worse. Certainly if under 45s are feeling more pressure than those over 45, then of course these numbers are going to get worse as the years go by. But also think about you know, with the rise of AI, a lot of the specific jobs and tasks that clergy were previously doing, like everyone else, are going by the wayside. So there's a kind of crisis of identity that's coming in with the rise of AI. Economic difficulties are making financial giving is decreasing in an awful lot of churches, which means that it's harder to undertake the ministry. And crucially, of course, we know that numbers of people attending church is dropping all over the world, a huge decrease in attendances. And of course, clergy feel that they are failing. They think it's their church that's dying, without putting it into the context of the broader picture of church decline across the West anyway. And so there's guilt, and there's all sorts of stuff going on in the heads of clergy as their church numbers decline, and they feel like they're failing. They feel like they're doing a bad job, and they just get more and more depressed. So this is a real issue that we're talking about today. And what can we do about it? What on earth can we do about it? Well, it's a complex problem, and I'm not going to suggest that I've got all the answers today, and even if I had, that we could fit them into one short video. But I do just want to raise two particular things that could help in addressing it. And the first is this, that I think our senior church leaders need to model good practice for mental health. I don't think that this kind of modelling of what it means to undertake ministry in a way that is good for our mental health is modelled very well at all. This is true for a number of reasons. Firstly, there's this idea, particularly amongst evangelicals, and I'm an evangelical, I'm from the evangelical wing of the church, so I hold my hands up on this, but there's this notion that we are called to burn out for Jesus, that we are to be so zealous for the gospel and for the work of the kingdom that we kind of just need to absolutely, out of passion and desire to see the kingdom of God grow. It's a phrase we often hear, I want to burn out for Jesus. You think, really? I remember when I was training to be a vicar, and I was in the Midlands, in a theological college in the Midlands of the UK. I won't name the college, but the local church there, I remember hearing the vicar preaching a sermon once, and he said to the congregation in the sermon, you've got to work for the kingdom. And then when you've worked for the kingdom till you've got nothing else to give, you've got to work some more. And I took that on, and I thought, yeah, that's what I want to be like. I want to burn out for Jesus. I want to have that impact for the glory of God. And that is, now I'm look back at it at the age of 57, that sermon shaped so much of how I've undertaken ministry over the last 32 years of being a priest. This idea that you've just got to keep working for the kingdom. And if you're not working for the kingdom, then somehow you're letting God down. It's toxic. It's poisonous. And it's not even good theology, but it's so at the heart of particularly an evangelical mindset, and we need leaders, senior church leaders, who will stand against that and will model something different as well. Because certainly in the denomination I'm a part of, the Church of England, and it may be true, let me know about your own denominations, it's certainly true in the Church of England that our bishops, our senior leaders, take on so many roles. They're bishops of their local area, but then they might be the Church of England lead on this, and the Church of England lead on that, and the diocesan lead on this, and the diocesan lead on that. And it's almost like they're bishoping, they're caring for their clergy is squeezed into their working week, because they've got so many other responsibilities going on as well. It doesn't model good leadership. The bishops that I see, generally speaking on the whole, do not model to me good working practice and a desire for the pursuit of good mental health. And a lot of clergy who overwork will guilt trip their other staff into developing an unhealthy work pattern as well. I'm not going to say, actually I was going to say who it was then, but I'm not going to, because that wouldn't be fair, because I haven't asked their permission. But somebody I know, let's just say somebody I know, worked for a church, and their vicar, they were a youth worker, and when they started, their vicar said to them, look, I work 7 days a week, I do about 80-90 hours a week. Now, I don't expect you to do the same thing. Of course, you can have a day off. But immediately, the expectation was set that working anything less than 7 days a week was somehow not taking that role seriously. And I remember when that person had an accident and they were sitting in A&E, I was sitting with them in A&E waiting to be assessed by a nurse. And their vicar phoned them and said, I know you're in A&E, but have you got cover for tonight's youth work session? Honestly, I was gobsmacked. I couldn't believe it. The expectation that whilst they were in hospital, they should be worrying about the rota for the youth group session that evening. Let me know in the comments if you have had similar experiences, or if this is ringing any bells for your church or for church ministers that you know. So the first thing I would say then is that we want senior leaders to model better practice than they currently are, and to stop guilt tripping, stop multitasking to a point where they can't possibly undertake all their roles properly, and to stop modelling this idea that somehow we need to burn out for Jesus. And then secondly, what about us? What can we do ourselves to address this issue? Well, I want you to think about, and I'll think about it myself as well, is how can we best support our church leaders? 3 things I want to suggest, and the first is this. Obviously, number 1 is we need to pray for our church leaders, and pray specifically for their mental health on a regular, ongoing, consistent basis. It's something we talk about. I mean, you know, you might say, oh yes, well, I pray for my pastor's ministry. Do it regularly. Maybe not daily, every Monday morning, whatever. Pray for your pastor's mental health. They really, really need it, and let them know that you are praying for them. Secondly, I would say, make it easy for your pastor to lead. Very often, we don't do that, do we? I'm aware that I'm a bit like this with my bishop and my archdeacon. The only time I ever really talk to my bishop and archdeacon is when I want to moan about something. I want to complain about a bit of diocese policy, or I want to moan about some financial thing, or some legal aspect of the Church of England. And so actually I don't really make it easy for my bishop and my archdeacon to lead me. And I wonder, to what extent do you proactively work hard to make it easy for your minister to lead you? Do you encourage them? Do you say kind words? Do you hold back on criticism? Do you go to your minister with problems or solutions? How nice it would be to say, okay, well, I've noticed this is an area of church life that's lacking, and this is what I want to do about it. You know, go with a solution rather than a problem. Do everything within your power to make it easy to lead, to be led. As I say, I'm very, very grateful to my current church congregation, because they're brilliant at that, and they do make it easy for me to lead them on the whole. But that's not the case with all church ministers. And the third thing I would say is for you to play your part in the work of the church. Play your part in the work of the kingdom of God. And that's not just to make your minister's life easy. it's actually just good theology. You know, the church is the body of Christ. We've all got a role to play within it. We've all got things that we should be doing. So, you know, can you play your part? Can you do a little bit more in ministry in the church? And the first thing I would say, as a church leader, I'm saying this to you, stop coming up with good ideas. As a minister, the amount of people who come to me and say, and not particularly my church now necessarily, but you know, historically as well, is that sorry, somebody was just talking to me in Spanish then, and I couldn't quite catch what they were saying. So one of the things I would say is, yeah, the amount of people who come with ideas and say, do you know what, we should be doing this, or we should be doing that, or we should be starting a youth group, or we should be doing, you know, this with the elderly or whatever. You know, it's okay to come up with ideas, but then just to park that at the doorstep of your minister and expect them to do it is asking a bit much, isn't it? So don't just come up with ideas, but be willing to play your part as well. You know, we remember the conversation between Jethro and Moses in Exodus 18. Jethro was Moses' father-in-law, and he said to him, you know, these people are going to wear you out. You need help. You need support. And so Moses put into place supportive leadership structures to help him. So be sure to play your part as well. So yeah, this video has been a bit longer than I'd anticipated, but it's such a crucial issue that we really need to deal with at the current time, the mental health crisis amongst Christian leaders. We want our leaders to thrive, don't we? Not just on a personal level, not just on a kind of human level, but we want them to thrive in their work today, and to help the churches they lead to thrive as well. And we can only help our leaders to thrive into the future if we help them to live lives that are beneficial in the present. The future health of our clergy is ultimately dependent on the health that we encourage for them today. Does that make sense? So a severe mental health crisis in the church today amongst leadership. Let's do everything we can to support our leaders and appreciate them and encourage them and pray for them, but practically as well, let's encourage our senior leadership to model something different around mental health, something more positive, and let's do all we can to find our place within the body of Christ as well. Thanks for being with me. If you're still here at the end of this, well done for sticking with me for so long. Yeah, let's address this issue together, and why not send your pastor an encouraging text as soon as you've finished watching this video, and ask them how you can best support them. Thanks for watching. See you again soon. Bye.